Have you ever, read a news headline and just immediately felt like you were only getting maybe 10% of the actual story?
Oh, absolutely. Like there's a whole iceberg hiding right under the surface.
Right, exactly. Well, imagine you are a United States senator and you are just furiously pacing around an airport terminal because your personal escort to the gate has been canceled.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you are completely oblivious to the fact that the agent who is actively screening your bags is secretly Googling whether their life insurance policy pays out for suicide.
It is incredibly dark. And that is exactly why, for today's deep dive, we're looking at a story where a major airline essentially forced Washington to look in the mirror.
Which is not something you see every day.
No, definitely not. So we've got this stack of sources centered around what looks like, on the surface, a totally standard corporate logistics update. But our mission today is to peel back the layers on this. We want to reveal the uncomfortable, kind of invisible power dynamics hiding underneath it all.
Because for you, the listener, being well informed isn't just about reading a recap of what
Yeah.
happened. It's really about understanding the mechanisms of leverage. Who holds the power and how are they using it?
And the leverage in this specific situation is, honestly, it's entirely inverted from how Washington normally operates. It's like this master class and institutional pressure in real life versus, how they teach it in a high school civics class.
Yeah, civics class definitely leaves out the airport VIP perks.
Oh, 100%. So let's just get right into the surface headline. I'm putting myself in the shoes of a general news consumer. I'm scrolling through my feed, and I hit this article from NBC News.
The Delta one.
Yeah, exactly. The headline literally reads, Delta suspends specialty services for members of Congress amid shutdown-driven TSA delays.
Okay, so just right off the bat, very dry, very corporate.
Super dry. The basic facts they lay out are that TSA workers have hit their third period without a paycheck.
Right, because of the government shutdown.
Yes, stemming from this huge political impasse between the White House and Congress over immigration enforcement and voting policies.
Yeah.
So because of these massive staffing shortages at airports, Delta Airlines is cutting off their VIP perks for lawmakers.
And we should specify what those perks actually are.
Right, so we are talking about expedited screening, canceling those personal airport escorts that let politicians just bypass the massive security lines, and shutting down dedicated reservation desks.
The ones that let them make those last-minute flight changes without waiting on hold.
Exactly. So reading that, if you're just scanning the news, it reads like a completely straightforward operational update.
Yeah, just an airline adjusting to a staffing shortage, right?
But see, I have to push back on this right out of the gate
Mm,
because my skeptical radar is just going off.
I don't blame you.
Like, on a surface, this sounds like standard crowd control. It feels less like some grand political statement and more like, I don't know, a theme park pulling the VIP fast passes because the general admission lines got way too long.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
Right, like if your resources are that stretched, you literally physically cannot provide the royal treatment. So, is there actually a deeper story here, or are we just reading way too much into a company managing a chaotic Sunday at the airport?
No, there is an absolutely massive story hiding beneath the logistics here. But to see it, it requires looking at the sort of invisible infrastructure of Washington.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, I actually fed this entire media cycle, so the NBC article, all the surrounding industry reporting, the statements from the unions, I put all of it into Nudge.
Oh, the Insight Engine.
Yeah, the AI insight engine built by Digital Weeks Builds. It's fantastic for cutting through surface noise. I specifically wanted to use their story versus reality feature.
I love that feature. It always completely flips the narrative.
It really does. I wanted to decode what the public narrative was versus the actual structural reality on the ground. And what Nudge spit back wasn't about logistics at all. It framed the entire situation around political shielding.
Okay, political shielding. Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
What exactly does the engine mean by that?
So the story being told to the public, right, is about a business making a difficult customer service decision due to resource constraints.
The fast pass analogy.
Exactly. But the structural reality underneath is completely different. Nudge highlighted that Congress essentially engineered a crisis through their political gridlock, but then they shielded themselves from the physical consequences of that crisis.
By using the VIP concierge treatment at the airport?
Yes, they were able to keep governing and traveling and just living completely normally until a private corporation quietly pulled the red carpet right out from under them.
Wow, and here is where it gets really interesting because the detail that completely solidifies that interpretation is something that was buried so deep in the reporting.
The lobbyist quote.
Yes. Two aviation industry sources pointed out just how much business airlines have pending before Congress at any given time. And one airline lobbyist actually warned Delta, like went on the record to say, get through this. Don't be doing things to members.
That single quote is just, I mean, it completely recontextualizes the entire headline.
It really does. It proves this was not just a casual, oh, we're short-staffed operational shift.
Not at all.
But I do have to ask, why the panic from the lobbyist? I mean, I get that airlines are regulated, but we are talking about taking away an airport escort.
Right. It's not a campaign donation.
Exactly. It's an escort to the gate.
Yeah.
Why would an industry lobbyist view pulling a simple VIP perk as this dangerous third rail?
Because the aviation industry's reliance on Congress is just structural and total. You really have to look at the mechanisms of how airlines operate in the U.S.
They aren't just operating in a totally free market.
No, not even close. They rely on Congress for periodic FAA reauthorization bills. And those bills dictate everything from safety regulations to airport infrastructure funding.
Right.
They rely on federal approvals for international routes. They fight viciously over limited landing slots at restricted airports like Reagan National in D.C.
Well, Reagan is notoriously restricted.
Exactly. And historically, the industry periodically requires massive federal bailouts just to survive economic downturns.
Okay, so the lobbyist is looking at this situation and basically saying, hey, do not anger our board of directors over a logistical bottleneck at TSA.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The lobbyist is terrified because you simply do not bite the hand that regulates you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when you connect that intense reliance to the bigger picture, Delta deciding to pull the perk anyway, expressly against the frantic advice of their own industry lobbyists, that is a massive, calculated power play.
It's a corporation forcing lawmakers to actually experience the reality of their own policies.
Precisely.
Okay, I hear the lobbyist warning, but let me just play devil's advocate for a second here, representing the skeptical listener.
Go for it.
Delta is a business whose core product is currently failing because of 4-hour security lines. If the airport is in a state of total meltdown, expedited VIP screening literally becomes operationally impossible to fulfill without, causing a literal riot among the general passengers.
Oh, absolutely. People would lose their minds.
Right. So isn't Nudge maybe reading a political motives into something that Delta simply had to do just to keep the terminal functioning?
That is a highly valid pushback, and Nudge actually accounts for that. Operationally, yes, the perk was completely unsustainable, but the mechanism of how Delta handled it is where the power play really lies.
What do you mean by the mechanism?
Well, they didn't just quietly suspend the service and blame the weather or general delays, right?
Oh, true.
The story was leaked, the framing was explicitly tied to the shutdown, and they made absolutely sure it was known that the very people causing the gridlock were the ones losing the privilege.
Okay. So they could have managed this quietly, but they chose to let it be loud.
Exactly. And the Nudge analysis points out that this specific choice is arguably the most honest commentary on the shutdown that Washington wasn't willing to make itself.
They basically looked at the architects of the shutdown and said, you are going to sit in the exact same 4-hour security lines that you created.
Yeah. And that pivot, that reality check, it forces us to look at the broader narrative here. Because what's fascinating here is that one of the core functions of the Nudge engine is that it trains you to ask a very specific question.
Who is this story centered on?
Yes, and more importantly, who is actively missing from the frame?
Right.
The initial headline centers entirely on Delta and Congress. It's a story about elites managing their own inconveniences. But who is entirely missing from that initial framing?
The actual workers, the people physically standing on the linoleum floors for hours on end.
Exactly. And that absence changes the entire moral weight of the story. The workers were missing from the frame until Delta's actions forced the media to look at why the lines were so long in the first place.
I really want you, the listener, to visualize this split-screen reality for a second. On one side of the airport terminal, you have lawmakers who are irritated about losing their dedicated reservation desks and, having to take their shoes off like everyone else.
Yeah.
Right. But then on the other side of that exact same building, the people who are actually keeping the airport safe, the ones staring at the x-ray screens, managing the explosive detection dogs, doing the physical pat-downs, they are living in an absolute cascading nightmare.
And the contrast is just staggering when you look at the raw data from the sources.
It really is.
We mentioned earlier that they had hit their third unpaid period. And keep in mind, they have been dealing with these shutdowns on and off for months.
Yeah, it wasn't just a sudden one-week thing.
Right. And the numbers bring the sort of abstract concept of a government shutdown right into a harsh mathematical reality. As of the reporting, the national Callout rate, meaning employees calling in sick or just notifying employers they cannot work their shift, was at 10.93% across the country.
But national averages always hide the local disasters.
Always.
In certain major hubs, the system was literally evaporating. At Houston's William P. Hobby Airport, the Callout rate spiked to 40.3%.
Unbelievable.
At Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, it hit 37.4%. I mean, you lose 40% of your security workforce overnight, and the infrastructure of air travel just collapses.
It completely collapses. And we have to explain the mechanism behind those callouts because it is crucial to understanding the power dynamics here. These workers aren't calling out as part of some formal, coordinated union strike.
No, because federal employees are legally prohibited from striking.
Exactly. The callouts are happening because the financial devastation has reached a point of absolute physical impossibility.
Right, they literally can't afford to get there.
Yeah, Heydrich Thomas, who is a union president, made this explicitly clear in the sources. He said people are not quitting because they want to quit. They are failing to show up because they literally cannot afford the gas to drive to the airport.
Or the tolls.
Or the tolls. And they definitely cannot afford the childcare required to watch their kids while they work a 10-hour shift for $0.
It is the mathematics of poverty, and it cascades so fast. The sources highlight these heartbreaking details about how this actually plays out in a worker's bank account.
It's brutal.
Union leaders report that workers are being hit with $75 a day late rent fees. They are getting absolutely hammered by automatic bank draft penalties.
Because the bills don't stop just because your paycheck does.
Right. Imagine missing a $2,000 paycheck, but your auto pay for your car insurance and your electricity still triggers. The bank honors the charge, hits you with a $35 overdraft fee for each transaction, and suddenly you are hundreds of dollars in the hole just for existing.
And that creates a financial trap that drastically outlasts the political news cycle. One union representative pointed out a devastating truth about those fees.
What was that?
Well, even when the political gridlock finally ends and these workers eventually get their back pay.
Right, they do eventually get paid.
Yes, but that back pay only covers their missing salary. The government does not reimburse them for the cascading hundreds or thousands of dollars in late fees, credit card interest, and overdraft charges.
Oh, wow.
The financial hole they were forced into becomes a permanent setback.
It fundamentally alters their family's trajectory for years. I mean, it has gotten to the point where union leaders report that some TSA workers are actually selling their blood plasma just to buy food for their families for the week.
Selling plasma.
Selling plasma to afford groceries while actively working a full-time, vital national security job for the federal government.
And it extends way beyond the airports, too. The sources mention the Coast Guard is enduring the exact same freeze.
Oh, right.
Everett Kelly, who is the national president of the American Federation of Government Employees, he noted that Coast Guard personnel are out there conducting dangerous maritime rescues, pulling people out of the ocean without knowing if they will have the money to buy groceries when they finally dock their ships.
It's just, It's worth noting that Kelly, representing the union, referred to the entire situation as a national embarrassment and a disgrace.
Which is pretty strong language.
Very strong. He even issued a direct warning to Congress and the press. He said, don't even think about going home for Easter recess while tens of thousands of American families are going without paychecks.
Well, holding their feet to the fire.
But beyond the anger, there is one detail in the sources that completely stopped me in my tracks. It is by far the darkest reality of this entire situation.
You are referring to the inquiries about the insurance policies.
Yes. Duncan McGuire, a union vice president, reported that he has been fielding questions from his members about the specific fine print of federal employee life insurance policies regarding suicide.
It's chilling.
Some of these workers are doing the horrific math and considering suicide as the only viable financial option to leave a lump sum of money behind for their loved ones because they cannot bring in a paycheck to keep the lights on.
It is a sobering metric of just how deep the collateral damage goes. When we hear about political gridlock over immigration funding and voting policies, the media often frames it like this theoretical debate on a Sunday morning panel show.
Right, it's treated as political theater.
Exactly. But the human toll on the ground is a worker wondering if their family would be better off financially if they were dead.
Hmm.
That is the actual reality occurring in the exact same building where VIP escorts were being provided to the people debating the policy.
So, putting myself back in the shoes of a consumer watching this all unfold, a massive question arises.
Yeah, what's that?
If 40% of the workforce at a major hub like Houston cannot physically afford to show up, the administration has an immediate, catastrophic administrative problem.
Oh, massive.
How is the government responding to a system breaking down this severely? Because surely they have to either end the shutdown or find some way to pay the workers to fix the root cause, right?
This is where Nudge's critical perspective analysis is incredibly illuminating because it breaks down how institutions patch their leaky roofs.
Okay, so what did they do?
Instead of ending the shutdown and paying the workers, the administration chose to exploit a loophole. They deployed ICE agents, immigration, and customs enforcement officers to several airports to handle various secondary security tasks.
Wait, I need to pause here because the mechanics of this just do not make sense to me.
I know, it sounds wild.
The government is shut down. TSA isn't getting paid. How is the administration legally and financially able to suddenly deploy highly trained immigration enforcement officers from an entirely different agency and turn them into ID checkers at Terminal B?
Yeah.
Like, how does that solve the underlying funding crisis?
Well, it doesn't solve the funding crisis. It bypasses it through jurisdictional and legal flexibility.
Yeah, okay.
It comes down to how different agencies are funded and categorized during a shutdown. Under the Anti-Deficiency Act, the government can force quote-unquote essential personnel to work without pay to protect life and property.
Which is why TSA is forced to show up empty-handed. Yeah.
Right. Now, IC is also under the Department of Homeland Security. But depending on their specific funding streams, some of which might be multi-year appropriations or fee-funded rather than relying on the frozen discretionary budget, the administration has some leeway.
I see.
They can reshuffle active law enforcement personnel to plug critical physical gaps in national security infrastructure. The logic was that by having IC handle things like checking IDs and managing the queues, it would free up the remaining exhausted TSA agents to focus strictly on operating the X-ray machines and conducting physical screenings.
So instead of addressing the fact that the actual trained professionals want to be there but literally can't afford the gas money, they are using legal gymnastics to bus in replacement labor from another agency just to keep the lines moving.
It is the ultimate symptom versus root cause scenario. They are treating the symptom, which is the long lines, rather than the root cause, which is the frozen payroll. And Nudge's analysis highlights how this move is viewed from different perspectives. It's really worth noting that the union leadership in our sources explicitly frames this deployment of ICE agents as a dereliction of duty.
I can imagine.
Their argument is that you cannot safely run a highly sensitive national security apparatus using exhausted workers who are running on empty bank accounts, patched together with replacement labor who aren't specifically trained for aviation screening.
I mean, from the administration's perspective at the time, deploying ICE was probably viewed as the only immediate triage available to keep the airspace open.
Sure, panic mode.
But from a safety standpoint, stretching the system that thin feels incredibly fragile.
It is highly fragile,
Yeah.
and that fragility brings us full circle to exactly why Delta's decision to pull the VIP perks was so structurally significant.
Because it forced the bottleneck upward.
Precisely. If we connect all these mechanisms to the bigger picture, this story reveals something profound about how government shutdowns actually function as a political tool.
How so?
The pain of a shutdown is structurally designed to be felt by the public and the federal workforce. That pain is supposed to create organic public pressure, which then forces a political compromise.
Right.
But the architects of the shutdown, the lawmakers themselves, are often heavily insulated from the friction they create.
Because they have their dedicated reservation desks. They had their personal escorts guiding them past the very security lines that were spiraling out of control due to their own funding freeze.
Exactly.
They were completely insulated from the pressure.
Until a corporation removed the insulation. It took a private entity removing a luxury perk for the people in power to finally feel the physical friction of the national crisis they were presiding over. The Nudge report summarized the entire power dynamic with a brilliant, concise framing.
Oh, is it?
Congress broke the airport. Delta sent them the bill.
Congress broke the airport, Delta sent them the... That completely changes how you read the news.
It really does.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you digest your daily feed? I think the biggest takeaway is that you can never just accept the surface framing of a headline.
Never.
When a corporation announces a seemingly boring logistical update, you have to look for the invisible leverage. You have to ask who is benefiting from the status quo, who is carrying the actual burden, and who is actively trying to shift the pressure.
And crucially, you must train yourself to ask who is missing from the frame entirely, because the people missing from the narrative are usually the ones paying the highest price.
Right, and Nudge brought those missing workers back into focus for us today. And just a quick transparency note from our sources here. While AI tools like the Nudge Insight Engine are incredibly effective at synthesizing this kind of complex, strategic intelligence and surfacing these hidden dynamics.
The story versus reality stuff.
Exactly. But the creators always remind users that AI is a tool, not an oracle. It can make mistakes, so it is always important to apply your own critical thinking and verify the important details yourself.
Yeah, technology can highlight the power dynamics, but human judgment is still required to understand the moral weight of them.
Always. Now, before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a specific actionable step pulled directly from the Nudge Analysis Calls to Action list.
Yeah, what should people be looking out for?
Based on everything we've unpacked regarding the leverage at play here, the most important thing you can do right now is watch the ongoing coverage closely. See if Washington actually pays attention and moves to break the gridlock now that their personal airport perks have been stripped away.
Pay attention to whether inconvenience achieves what human suffering could not.
And on a more immediate, practical level, consider reaching out to your local airport or local TSA authorities.
Oh, that's a great point.
Check to see if there are volunteer efforts or donation drives happening in your community. As the sources noted, airports, local unions, and charities have been desperately holding food drives and collections just to keep these unpaid workers afloat.
Because the human stakes are not abstract. As the analysis points out, the more people who understand the financial reality of what is actually happening to these workers, the harder it becomes for anyone in power to justify looking away.
Absolutely.
This dynamic raises a deeply uncomfortable question, though, and it is the final thought I want to leave you with to mull over on your own.
All right, let's hear it.
We have walked through the devastating human costs today, right? The late fees, the plasma donations, the impossible, tragic choices about life insurance.
Yeah.
And we have seen the specific mechanical lever it finally took to get the attention of the decision makers. So consider this. If it takes losing a VIP airport escort for the people in power to finally feel the urgency of a collapsing national infrastructure, what does that say about the everyday invisible distance between the people who make the laws and the people who are forced to survive under them?